Welcome to Scale of Justice, a program where we highlight our justice system. We bring it before bear as we interrogate our systems of justice, access to credible and alternative dispute resolution, and how Nigerians can be able to have the required justice that they need, right? So today on the program, we will be looking at something very important, and that is the rule of law. The rule of law. So the rule of law is one of the very prominent pillars of any democratic society, right? It means that everyone, whether a president, a governor, a public official, a politician, a security agent, a business owner, or anybody, as far as you live in a society, has equal rights to the law. It guarantees freedom, it guarantees fundamental rights, and also guarantees justice is administered irrespective of where you come from, your skin color, or who you are. That is basically what the idea of the rule of law is. It's about equality before the law, a society where everybody can approach the law, and the law is seen to be able to give justice, right? It's seen to be fair to everyone who is involved in the process, the rule of law. So the balance of the law, where is it, and when the rule corresponds with the law, it's supposed to be the same, irrespective of who comes before the law. So some of the things that shows the rule of law, we could talk about equality before the law. We could talk about checks and balances, right? Where in our system, for instance, the use of power, we have the kind of system we run where we have the legislature, we have the judiciary, we have the executive. There should be this checks and balance where everybody has, or every system of government, every tier of government has its own responsibility, right? The executive has the responsibility of making sure that they carry on with the budgetary provision. They go on to implement projects that have been approved by the legislature, and the judiciary has the sacred role of interpretation of the law, right? So the rule of law, so because of the rule of law, sometimes some persons get to see accused when people are caught, we still say that these persons are accused, because the law must be able to carry out its responsibility and declare somebody convicted. If the law does not declare somebody convicted, the person is still an accused, right? So and the person is presumed innocent until the law has pronounced the person not to be innocent, or the law has pronounced the person guilty. So very technical about it, and it shouldn't apply to just some person. It should be for everybody, right? So the presumption of innocence, independence of the judiciary, very important. And below the freedom that comes with the rule of law, we see many of them. We have the freedom, the right to justice, we have the rights of association, we have the rights of movement, and all of these other issues that are embodied in the rule of law. But most times we keep asking questions in our country. In Nigeria, are we seen to practice the rule of law in our country? And that's going to be our conversation for today. Do we practice the rule of law in our country? Are all equal before the law? Or like George Orwell's Animal Farm, are some animals more equal than some animals, right? These are all we must be able to interrogate in our country and see why the rule of law matters for us as a country, and where and what we can do to be able to make some very good impact as regards the rule of law in our country as we move forward. Because of recent there have been lots of accusation, frontal, and sometimes inadvertently we hear people say things about our country. Some persons say we do not practice rule of law. There are some Nigerians who do not believe that Nigeria has shown capacity to be able to practice rule of law. We've seen that time and time again. Some persons have accused the country, of accused leadership, different leadership of not being as fair to everybody who is involved, right? These are very essential questions. So when we talk about also the rule of law, the rule of law helps to secure a democratic society, ensures that no individual, no institution, no government is above the rule of law, right? So some of these things that I mentioned, the principles in the pyramid are essential parts of the rule of law in Nigeria and everywhere, right? That's not sure about it's in everywhere. Equality before the law, citizens and government are accountable by the law, rights to silence, presumption of innocence, fair trial and independence of the judiciary, rights to assembly, democracy through formal legal processes, access to justice, and we keep seeing all of this as being a very important conversation as far as the rule of law is concerned, right? So the rule of law is widely regarded as the foundation of every democracy. It ensures that no individual, no institution, no government is above the law. You're also guaranteeing justice, accountability, and equality, and the protection of fundamental human rights. In Nigeria, however, there have been questions over the independence of the judiciary. There have been questions over the compliance with court judgments. Over time, we've seen some Nigerians question our ability to comply to court judgments. These questions have arose time and time again. And also the protection of civil liberties. Some Nigerians have questioned, do we really protect civil liberties in Nigeria? Are Nigerians, the rights of Nigerians protected under the law of our country? Then also we could talk about the fight against corruption and the balance between national security and constitutional rights. So these issues have remained central to debate about the country's democratic development and public confidence in our institution, right? As Nigeria prepares for another election cycle, many citizens are asking very critical questions, and the questions citizens are asking are, is the country's legal and democratic institution strong enough? Are we practicing the rule of law in Nigeria? Do we have some persons who are being favored above some persons, some political parties who are being favored above some political parties? So today we examine the state of the rule of law in Nigeria as we examine the challenges that we've seen confronting our justice system and explore practical reforms that can help shape and sharpen our system, the system we run in Nigeria, and deepen our democracy, of course, which many persons paid with their lives for us to be able to enjoy this democracy. And rule of law comes with our democracy. And in fact, even talk about improved governance, as we discussed with Jimmy Abia, who is a lawyer and also a chartered arbitrator on the rule of law, and we ask questions about the Nigerian state. Stay with us. Let's go for a short break, and when we're back, we'll bring Jimmy into the program as we have this discussion. Alright, so thank you so much, Abia, for coming on the program. Yeah, a very good evening to you. Let's talk about an assessment of the rule of law in Nigeria. What comes into your mind when you hear of the rule of law in our country? Mic is muted. Can you help us unmute your mic? Mute your mic. Unmute your mic. Unmute your mic. Help me unmute your mic. Oh.
Tell me again.
Speak without the earpiece, we hear you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
We can manage. Go ahead.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, good. Good. Okay. So what I said was that we'll first of all understand what the rule of law means. And the rule of law simply means the supremacy of law. It means that government and individuals in a country are subject to the law. That means that whether you are government, whether you are a corporation, whether you are a society or body within that system or individual within that system, you are subject to the law. That is what rule of law means in simple terms. And then when it comes to Nigeria, rule of law means subjection, being subject to the constitution, which is the ground norm, which Nigerians are deemed to have made, even though there are objections to that, but the constitution or any constitution is deemed to have been made by the people for themselves to guide and guard their conduct. And then subjection to that ground norm and subjection to other statutes and other laws and the judicial system, subjection to the judicial system and the dictates of the law in general. That is exactly what the rule of law would imply, both in Nigeria and elsewhere in the world.
Look at election system. Some person look at freedom of the press and expression. When we look at some of these pointers to the rule of law, right, the liberty, ability to access the justice system without having to know anybody, and all of those pointers, do you think Nigeria has done very well, especially since the return to democracy?
Well, Nigeria has not. The clear results, scorecard shows that Nigeria has clearly not done the best it could. Indeed, has not done well when it comes to the rule of law. Because when you look at abuse of human rights, and also you look at the corruption index. Now, these are not just my statistics. These are also not just Nigerian statistics. These are international statistics from internationally reputable bodies showing that corruption in Nigeria is very high. What I mean is among the least 10 when it comes to corruption. And also when it comes to human rights infringement, Nigeria does not also do very well. Now, where a country is practicing the rule of law properly, so to speak, that country, it will affect both issues of corruption, because you will find that government officials will be subject to the law. Individuals, no matter how highly placed, will be subject to the law. So you will see a reduction in corruption. Then you will also see a drastic reduction in the abuse of fundamental rights. So a country where these indices are not showing positive results, shows clearly that Nigeria has not actually adhered to the principles of the rule of law as should be.
Time again is the fact that it seems a justice system is delayed. We have this delayed system, and some persons have even made allegations that it seems maybe our justice system has been bought over by politicians. And if that is the case, it would have affected our global rating. How are we rated globally? And in your view, how do you rate justice system, which is an integral part to sustaining the rule of law?
Yes, like I've said, I mean, where you mentioned that the rule of law has, not actually been adhered to in a country, it means that there are deficiencies within the justice system. Though to speak about it, it is not entirely that of the blame of the judicial justice system. However, the justice system carries a lot of the blame in terms of when you have judgments that do not follow established laws and precedents, and where you also have judgments that do not inspire public confidence in the judiciary. And then you also have actions that also do not, apart from judgments, but actions that do not inspire public confidence, because justice needs to be not just be done, but manifestly seen to be done. So where, for instance, you find that the executive is building houses for judges, and especially in the circumstance of this, where you have it seeming like it is like a largesse, to the judiciary, you cannot exactly say that justice, has taken course in the country, has been, seen to be done. There might not be anything on the hand, but it will not inspire confidence of the public. And then even if you look at judgments, there are judgments that leave a lot to question about how the judgment came about. So that's why I would say that there's a whole lot which the justice system needs to do for itself to get it better. There's a whole lot to do.
Let's talk about the fact that you are a lawyer. Some persons have said there are persons who have cases and they cannot afford legal fees. And I was looking through, this is one of the things that people say, access to systems that could allow you to be heard. Is it true that in Nigeria there are persons who may have cases and they are not able to afford legal services, or at least the right kind of services they need?
Okay, that of the cost of affording legal service is there, and the truth is, the cost has gone higher under this current administration. It keeps going higher, and sometimes, even as a lawyer, I wonder how people would be able to still, people, especially people who are indigent, will still be able to access justice in many cases. Why? Because even the cost of filing actions in courts have increased. And as you are bearing the cost, you're also bearing charges in filing those actions in courts. The cost of, apart from filing, the cost of service, the cost of other things related, even the cost of delay, in the judicial system is there. And all these costs are borne not just by the lawyer, but by the litigants themselves. So, and even apart from that, there's also the issue of the legal cost, because the other legal cost, which is the money you pay to your lawyer, to also have, because the country, the economy is not also doing so good. You find that the cost of living has increased. So legal practitioners who approach the court will usually charge more for their services. And this has affected the cost of people getting justice. And then again, you have in other countries, even in Nigeria, you have bodies that should ordinarily have been set up by government, and indeed have been set up by government. You have Office of Public Defender, like in Lagos. You have other bodies that can render free services for the indigent. But the question is, how much can these bodies take? Because they are not fully resourced. They are not well resourced, fully resourced in terms of personnel, in terms of manpower, to take up as many cases of the indigent as come to court. They are also not fully well funded, both at the federal and state level, to handle this. Indeed, some states do not even have such, in terms of access to justice, in terms of free services for people who are indigent. And it scares a lot of people away from the justice system. So this is there. The truth is the cost of legal services is increasing, and a lot of people, even if not entirely indigent, may not, even if they earn a living, they may not be able to afford it. Going also, when you consider the fact that minimum wage is just 70,000, imagine someone living on that or slightly higher. How would the person even be able to, if the person is wronged at his workplace or elsewhere, how would the person be able to, afford justice?
I'd like to still stay with you and ask. Some persons have even talked about, you're a lawyer, the ratio of Nigerian lawyers to Nigerians, that ratio. Do we have a comparative amount of lawyers, that as to our population? It's a country of over 200 million people.
Yes, we have about 200 million Nigerians. And then we have, I'm not entirely sure about the current figures, but the figures should be around 150,000 lawyers in Nigeria. And you know that it is not everybody that is practicing. So let's say you have, plus minus, including the ones that are deceased already. Maybe you have like 120,000 lawyers who are practicing, who are effectively practicing in Nigeria. Now, the question is, will this 150,000 or 120,000 or thereabout be enough for 200 million people or more, 200 million or more Nigerians? Well, the question, the answer, the obvious answer would be no. However, the fact that Nigerians do not also approach the justice system for resolution, means that not all these lawyers, even though they are not as many as would in other countries, in terms of ratio and in terms of percentage. However, you probably do not have up to 50 million people that actively seek justice in Nigeria the way they should. So you probably have, I do not think Nigeria has fewer lawyers than needed or more lawyers than needed. Going by the current situation in the country, the current status in the country. However, if the number of people seeking justice in Nigeria, increases, not the population of the country, but the number of people who actively seek justice through the justice system increases, then the number of lawyers, it will be insufficient to handle that. But I think for now, the number of lawyers is just adequate for the number of the population that actively currently seek justice.
Right, so thank you so much for staying with us on the program Scale of Justice today, as we looked at the rule of law, and we thank our guest too, Jimmy Abia, for speaking to us. We hope that we can have a country where everybody have equal access to the law. My name is Ubong Osoro. Until we come again, stay conscious and stay lawful. Bye for now.